My name is Allen Blackwell. I'm the partnership coordinator for National Voter Registration Day, and we're very much happy to have you here for our second webinar. If you get a moment, please save the date for September 17th. That is National Voter Registration Day this year. Excited for it. Looking forward to everyone participating. So our webinar theme today is Spread the Word, Spread the Vote, promoting your NVRD event. So what does that look like, and how the information we'll share out today will support you in that. First and foremost, I want to thank our sponsors and premier partners. This is a list of the partners who have really helped to make National Voter Registration Day a success. If you're a recipient of any of our grants, these are the ones who have helped to support our grants this year. If you applied and unfortunately you weren't selected, we very much appreciate the work that you're doing, and look at this as an opportunity for you to learn some of the things that we're doing, and hopefully you signed up as a community partner to receive the resources. With that said, we're going to start the agenda. I just want to make sure we do some housekeeping. This webinar will be recorded. We will share this out. So any of the links that you see within the webinar, you will have access to after. So just so that you know, just so that you have it on your end. So with that said, we'll do welcomes. Today, our webinar will be a three-part webinar. I'll do the introduction. I'll be the MC. We also will have our communications director on board, who is, if you've seen any of our social media posts, this is the architect behind that, and a great opportunity to hear the great work that he's done this year. And then we also have Caitlin Harder from Clyde, who is our PR firm who's supporting National Voter Registration Day, who will give you a lot of great information from the PR side and how you can support the holiday and uplift the work that you're doing. Then we'll go over our strategic plan for voter registration. We'll do general messaging. We'll talk about maximizing your social media impact. We'll also go over our crisis communication strategy, which will be led by Clyde, who's overseeing that work, and then NVRD tools and resources, and then we'll close out with the Q&A. That should cover all the bases for today. So with that said, let's start with strategic planning for voter registration. So with that said, the first thing is I want us to be grounded in this work. And with that grounding, I want us to think about the macro to the micro, right? That's the mindset. Is, National Voter Registration Day, just for those who are new, is a national holiday. It is a celebration. It is a day of upliftment, and a way in which we support community partners and individuals with participating in National Voter Registration Day. The key for the communications plan is, how do you communicate that to the wider audience as an organization that may have specialized in something for the last several months, but now is uplifting this holiday? So the first thing in that is your plan elements, right? You want to set a clear expectation and clear objectives for what you're doing for National Voter Registration Day. You want to make sure that that's premier in all that you do, and that you're uplifting that as a part of your work, that you're a part of the collective, and this is the work that you're doing. Also, identifying your target audiences. If you've seen our posters in the past and our posters this year, we have them in 7 different languages. A lot of the materials that we distribute are in multiple languages, and that's identifying that in America, everyone doesn't speak English. It's not their primary language. And when we're speaking to those audiences, we want to be able to communicate in the language that's connected to them. If you saw one of our most recent posts, we've done a lot of things around the Olympics, right? Understanding that the Olympics is in the zeitgeist of the current climate of the country. So how do you use that to your advantage? And then also including a timeline milestones. In this work, it's key that you're monitoring, you're documenting the successes and the failures that you're having, so that you can make those changes moving forward. And then also send that timeline to make sure that when you're doing this, you're being realistic, right? We are roughly about 30 days out from National Voter Registration Day. The plan that you may put in for the next 30 days will be drastically different than what you've done over the last 120 days. So making sure that the work that you're doing is within the timeline available. Also creating a comprehensive communication plan. Our mindset is these are really kind of best practices and things to help you to create these elements for your job and for your organization. So do you align with voter registration goals? Are you knowledgeable about what's going on within your state? The way in which you register someone to vote in Texas versus Arkansas are different. And where are those differences? And how do we highlight those similarities and those differences? And us as advocates, being the most knowledgeable person when we're talking to people, and we have resources that help and support that. Also, tools and resources, utilizing templates in previous webinars and communications. Over the last several months, we've held several webinars. I would implore upon many of you to go and look at some of those previous webinars because you may have a question or you need some additional information that could be beneficial to you as you're planning out your activations. And then we also have some communications that will help to give you a baseline for your communications so that you don't have to just think of things off the top of your head. You'll have at least a baseline resource to use from us to help you promote your activations and your activities to the greater community, but also as a part of the collective. So if you look at our posters do have a section that's dedicated for you to speak specifically to what your needs are as an organization. So you can say, hey, we're holding National Voter Registration Day at this location with this organization. And that helps to just give people a clear way of understanding what the activation is for them on their end and how they can participate. So what are the components of a comprehensive communication plan? On the right-hand side, that is our communication plan for this year. We have just recently released this. It's on our website. And as I said here, when we send out this presentation, you'll have access to a link that will connect you to our communication strategy guides. And when we were developing this, these were the best practices that we were able to pull out and share with you today. The first one is your objectives, lining them up as a SMART goal, right? Giving yourself the ability to create a goal that's achievable and direct, and that you're understanding that what's the success and failures of accomplishing that. If you're just saying, hey, the goal is to register people, how do you determine what registering people is? But if you say, I want to register 100 organizations or 100 individuals, that gives you the ability to say at maybe the 50th registry or the 50th person who's registered that, hey, we're 50% of the way to our goal, right? It's more achievable. It's more of a direct number. Identifying your target audiences. I use a state like Minnesota, which has a very diverse community. How do we speak to all those different communities and make sure that it's inclusive? The great thing about National Voter Registration Day is we are a big umbrella that's looking to incorporate more people. So it's a great opportunity for you to talk to communities that you may have been disconnected to, or talk to people who are on the periphery of your organization or of the community, but are very much a part of the community. And how do we connect with them and speak to them in their language? Using key messaging, understanding that the messaging should always be direct and it should always speak to the audience that you're reaching out to, right? If I'm speaking to a younger audience, I want to use things that are more relevant to them. I won't tell them about 90s hip hop when many of them may have been born in the 2000s, right? It becomes irrelevant and it doesn't really connect. And always making sure it connects. Identifying your communication channels, right? Knowing what's the difference between social media. If I'm going to do a TikTok, I'll use one of my elders the other day said, we're going to do a TikTok. How do I post this picture? And it was that lack of knowledge of knowing that this is a video format versus a visual format. And how do we work within that? And that's a good way, a good strategy to connect with your communications team on, because they know what's most effective to reach each audience and how do you expand that out. A content strategy, right? Knowing that there is a different level of content for each audience, that some audiences just showing them an image may be beneficial, but for some, explaining the image is a lot better. And identifying making it accessible also is always a benefit to you. So that when people are reading the materials, that the font is in the right format, that they can read it, that the images are relevant, and those different things. Creating a crisis communication plan. Things happen, right? Things go unplanned. How do you deal with those issues when they come up? And then evaluation and metrics. That you're always making sure that you can document exactly what your goals are. Going back to the objective, right? As a former teacher, we always looked at the pre and post, right? So what did you plan in the beginning? And then how was it executed at the end? And using those to improve your strategy moving forward, and then always creating a realistic timeline for you and your organization. That's always a benefit to how you can move things forward. If you know exactly which, if in 2028, when we have another election, you can take some of the best practices that you've learned this year and incorporate them then. It always should be a growing process. So with your comms plan, here's where you should focus for the next 30 days, right? Is it clear what you're saying? Are you sharing out? And I use this example in the middle. Is it clear the message that we're trying to send, right? Are we using keywords and verbiage that's speaking to the audience? Are we consistent, right? Are we putting out materials every week, information every week, bi-weekly, monthly? And how do we make sure that we're always on time with that, right? Because you can lose your audience by being inconsistent. Is it relevant? Are you speaking to the current climate of the country, right? Are you understanding, right? Are you speaking to the audience that's reading it from afar, and are you using eyes within to kind of look at the different parts in which you're sharing out with the community? Engagement, is it an engaging image? When I look at this image, I'm going to pick out one thing on this is, if we're talking about 2020, if we're talking about 2020, toilet paper was at the top of the zeitgeist. So always that reference back to something that's connecting all of us as different people and different cultures. Flexibility, that sometimes the message doesn't hit. Are you flexible to change the message, or are you going to just keep kind of beating that drum, trying to force it into people's mindsets when in reality it may just be an internal change? And then is it measurable? Are you measuring what you're doing? Are you just doing it arbitrarily, or are you really focused on making sure that you can connect with a specific audience? These are the things you shouldn't focus on, and I'll be brief with them. Unverified information, picking third parties to share out information is really you distilling their information and giving it out. Where if you get a first use a primary resource such as like the AP or Reuters as news sources, that gives you more credibility in what you're sharing out, and you don't become like a drum of partisanship. Are you overwhelming people with the amount of content? Are you just sending them a lot of information, but you're not really distilling it down for them to retain? Sometimes within this work, share out that information with sometimes barrage people with so much information that they're not really comprehending it. So making sure it's bite-sized and able to be digested. Is it negative or off-brand, right? This is a celebration. This is about happiness. This is about fun. So when we're sharing out, voter registration is a positive, regardless of who's saying anything contrary to that. The reality is a day of celebration, is a day of connection. We should always uplift that and use it as a good versus a negative. And a lack of focus, right? Are you just throwing everything at the wall, hoping that something sticks, or are you being very exact to what your organization offers? And are you being persistent in that messaging? Making sure that on National Voter Registration Day in particular, we're not talking about Bitcoin, that we're always sticking to the message that we're sharing. Even if we do, for whatever reason, hear something about a different subject, that we always relate it back to the task at hand and we're not jumping all over the place. And then poorly timed content. This is a big country. We have 4 different time zones. So there are times in which you should share out materials to be mindful of who's receiving it, right? If I send it out at 9 p.m. or excuse me, 9 a.m. East Coast time, those who are on the West Coast are still asleep or some are just getting up. So if I want a reaction or a response to the materials that I'm sharing, I want to be mindful that they're getting what they need. So with that said, I'm going to pass it on to our communications director. So if you've ever seen any of our websites or our Instagram, this is the architect behind that information, a great mind to look at this work and is really great at exhibiting those qualities I just shared. So I want everyone to welcome onto the webinar, Travis Morin.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you all folks for coming here. Yeah, as Alan mentioned, this is our communications webinar where we're talking about just the kind of broad spectrum of everything relating to talking about this holiday and messaging this holiday. So I'm going to cover some of the basic key messaging, kind of like what we're talking about this year as opposed to other years, because every NVRD is a little bit different. And yeah, we'll kind of work our way from there. So let's start with key messaging. So this is a general overview of key messaging for the holiday in 2024. All of this is covered in our communications toolkit in the key messaging and talking points section, but I figured it'd be beneficial to kind of go over this stuff in the room together. About the holiday, September 17th is when we celebrated this year. We have been around since 2012, and our whole goal is to work every year on a nonpartisan basis to get every eligible American registered to vote in time for Election Day. We have this holiday at this part in the calendar because this is when folks historically start paying more attention to elections, start paying more attention to voting and thinking about voting. Labor Day kind of tends to be that cutoff point. So yeah, obviously this year things have been a lot busier. The election's been tumultuous, for lack of a better term. So folks have been tuned in a lot earlier, and there's a lot of excitement, a lot of energy, a lot of questions, and that's why we think our holiday is best positioned to help answer those questions and get folks involved and engaged. The need. So the holiday exists because we know 1 out of 4 people either aren't registered to vote or don't know they're whether they're registered to vote. Which is a huge gap in our voter registration rolls, which produces uh, distortions in our democracy. If not everybody is participating, then our democracy does not reflect everybody voting and having their say. So some key messages for this year specifically. This year's is down ballot races. We know folks for a long time this year maybe weren't super excited about that top of the ticket race. If they were, maybe they weren't. But it's emphasizing these races all up and down the ballot. It's your state, it's your congressman, it's your senator, perhaps, it's your state legislature, it's your mayor, it's your city council, it's your dog catcher. It's all of these roles we think about or perhaps don't think about, who are more connected to our lives at the more local level. It's hard to pay attention to. Those issues are maybe not top line news like national races are. But when you're voting on November 5th this year, you're voting for everything. It's your right. This year, we happen to share NVRD with Constitution Day on September 17th. So the 2 days have a lot in common. We are days that celebrate a nonpartisan pillar of our democracy, and we think there's a lot to learn from both those. We have some specific messaging for that in our communications toolkit, as well as some specific social media graphics in our social media toolkit. Also, this year, new voting laws. We all know since 2020, there have been a raft of new voting laws across all the states. Some have made things a little bit easier, some have made things a little bit more stringent. Either way, the landscape has probably changed if you voted in 2020 and have not voted since, which a lot of Americans do not do. We know most folks vote in presidential election years, and in those off years, it's a bit more touch and go. So this is our first big chance to let folks know, hey, things may have changed. Perhaps you need to update your voter registration so you can make sure you can vote on November 5th. Also, life changes. We know, for example, that a lot of folks moved to take advantage of work from home during COVID. That means if you moved either across the country or across the street, you need to update your voter registration to reflect your new address, and that may be an impediment when you go to vote. Same goes for a name change. If perhaps you've gotten married, if you've changed your name legally for some other reason, if you become a new citizen, all of these things necessitate a change in your voter registration. Again, this holiday, great chance to make that thing loud and proud. And lastly, engaging new voters. We know there's been about 16 million folks who have turned 18 since 2020. Huge. Think about it. Folks who are going to be 18 this year, who in 2020, which feels like yesterday, were 14 years old, more or less, and are voting for the very first time. And we need to make sure they're registered to vote because it's not happening automatically everywhere. Some folks need that extra attention, whether it's at a high school event, whether it's somewhere else. And, again, this year, a great chance to make it happen. So those are some of our key messaging points. Again, we expand on those in our communications toolkit. So make sure you look out for that. Again, the sample messaging themes this year, we've kind of got 3 broad messages we're talking about in 2024. One, celebrate democracy. That's what this holiday is all about, is celebrating our democracy, but making sure you're registered to vote and participate in it. Sample message 2, rise up and register. We know the last 4 years has felt kind of like a dream. It's flown by quickly. You think about 2020 was just yesterday. All of these things have happened. Whether you felt like you had a good dream or a bad dream these last 4 years, it's already here. It's time to rise up, register, and take part in our democracy. And number 3, keep down ballot races top of mind. As we've mentioned, whether you are thrilled with the top of the race or whether you are a bit ambivalent about it, there are all these races below that you should still weigh in on. And that's our kind of key messages this year. Maximizing social media impact. So we put together a social media toolkit, both a PDF kind of simplified version as well as an expanded version on our website that you can use to access graphics, access pre-made posts and text that you can use to put to work and promote your event, promote the holiday, and make things as easy as possible for you. So when you're doing that, when you're using those, you want to, 1, identify the best platforms for your audience. Are you working primarily with an older audience? I'm talking maybe between mid to late 30s and a bit older. If so, maybe Facebook's the best place to put your stuff. If it's a younger audience, perhaps it's TikTok or it's Snapchat. It's always thinking about where your people are and how you're trying to reach them and meeting them where they are. Same thing along with that goes with frequency of posts. If it's something like Facebook, perhaps it's 2 to 3 posts a day. If it's TikTok, if it's Instagram Reels, perhaps it's a couple more. It's always thinking about what works best in what particular platform. Um, Engagement strategies. That's also thinking about interactive content. So that's question and answer, that's polls, that's saying, hey, drop something in the comments, tell me what you think. Anything to get people engaged, because how these social media algorithms tend to work is things that garner engagement. So that's likes, that's, if you're on Facebook, those surprise, those angry, those sad emojis, that's what gets bumped to the top. So making sure your content's engaging gets people's attention, gets people thinking about and questioning and wanting to have a conversation. And also responding to comments and messages. So a good way to make sure that engagement keeps going is commenting, liking, saying, hey, great idea. Thank you for weighing in. Here's this resource we can point you to. Just always look for an opportunity to keep the conversation going with those folks who are engaging with your content. So things to think about and things to avoid in your social media plan. What should be included? Obviously, objectives and goals. Who you're reaching out to, what you want them to do, what your call to action is, how to make sure it has a sense of urgency wrapped around it. Top of mind. Looking at audience analysis. Now, that doesn't mean you need to go into the data and try to parse all of these graphs and pie charts. Just looking at what does best. What posts you're doing tend to get the most likes, your most comments, get the most shares. There's simple ways to do this that don't involve getting super crunchy munchy into all this, social media rigmarole. Having a general content strategy. So we would suggest thinking about things you want to talk about week to week leading up to the holiday. Maybe one week you're talking about state and local elections. Maybe one week you're talking about, how to make sure you know where your polling place is. Just kind of focusing on one message and hammering it home so folks have a sense of consistency. As we spoke before, platform selection. So thinking about what platforms work best with your audience. Engagement strategy. So having a plan, not just kind of throwing things in the wall and seeing what sticks, just kind of knowing what you want to talk about and when. Establishing a brand voice and tone. Your audience will stick around and, excuse me, follow with you if your voice kind of coincides with what they're expecting. Nothing out of the, I think we'll see some legacy brand all of a sudden get overtaken by crypto, and we'll start posting in a very outside the box tone and voice that kind of throws some people off and get a lot of folks to unsubscribe around then. So just making sure you're being consistent, speaking in a way that your audience wants to hear and is comfortable with, and meeting them where they are. Again, this is a very important part of democracy work. Visual and creative elements. Make your graphics interesting. Make sure it's content that you yourself will want to engage with. Think about what would I want to see? What would keep me scrolling through my phone? What would make me want to like your page and keep seeing more? Also taking advantage of hashtags and keywords. So at least when it comes to hashtags, this is a general way to, back in I'm a child of the 90s, we still call it a pound sign for a long time, but on social media, the hashtag is just a way to categorize and group things together. So for example, obviously, nonpartisan voter work is nonpartisan, but politics is a good hashtag for folks who are interested in this stuff. Elections, just things that generally categorize and put this work into buckets and get people to perhaps see it more. Same thing for keywords. Election, voting, 2024. Perhaps the two top candidates' names will drive some eyeballs and perhaps some comments that are a bit interesting, but you can always filter those out, and you can always just make sure your content is emphasizing nonpartisanship. And of course, analytics and metrics, as we mentioned before. When you analyze the data, you can get as granular as you want to, but on a broad kind of quick and dirty scale, just seeing what's working, what your likes are, what's being engaged with, and kind of adapting to that and serving up more of that. Here's a few kind of examples we kind of gathered for kind of voter content that we think works well versus stuff that we would try to steer clear away from. Here you see on the left side are a couple of graphics we made. One here, 468 seats up in Congress are for re-election in 2024. That's a very simple message. It's nonpartisan. It's emphasizing those down ballot races again. It's saying no matter how you feel about that top race, like you have a congressman or congresswoman that you're voting for this year. That second one is a graphic that we made. If registering voters for the sport, Simone Biles there, America's sweetheart, who was racking up the gold in Paris, and very popular on social media. Just looking at those trends week to week and seeing what people are talking about and trying to hijack it in the best way you can. That's funny, that's engaging, that's relevant to culture, will produce good results more times than not. Some not so great examples. Here you see a rather unsettling post with Leonardo DiCaprio here, and this one here calling I voted stickers participation trophies. That's just not cool. Yeah. So I would steer clear of things that belittle, that try to make light of voting or make light of democracy. And, because what we're doing here, our goal here is to make sure people know, hey, this is an important thing you should participate in. It's cool, despite what you may think. It doesn't need to be this partisan headache of stressfulness. It can be about joy. It can be about celebrating our democracy. And that's what we're here to do, and keep it positive, keep it fun, keep it light, keep it inspirational. And that's what this content can and should do when we think about it and plan ahead enough. Actually, at this point, I'm going to hand it over to our friends at Clyde, our PR firm, who's been doing some great work for us, Caitlin Harder, who's going to talk a little bit about some, more broad, more kind of strategic social media stuff you can lay into your strategies. And yeah, I'll hand it over to you, Caitlin.
Thanks, Travis. Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin Harder. I am with Clyde. We are a public affairs and PR firm in Washington, D.C. More than that, we have a dedicated democracy practice, and we are here to help organizations and National Voter Registration Day really get uplifted. So for what it's worth, we craft strategies, we develop messages, work on crisis plans all across regulated industries, but our passion is the democracy space itself. So very excited to be here and share what we know and help y'all out with your planning. All right, so Travis and Allen both touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to talk a little bit deeper about what it means to create engaging content. So if you're working, whether it's on social media, you're creating resources for your event, your website page, a press release, the most important element of it is you have to grab the attention of your audience, whether it's the press, whether it's people you want to register to vote, whether it's your sister who is just refusing to sign up this year. When you do this, you need to think about, what will it take? Will it take a data point? Will it take a familiar face like Snoop Dogg? I saw somebody comment on that. You need to think of a way that specifically speaks to your audience and develops and builds out connections. And what do we mean by building connections? It's using the voices with whom you represent or other intriguing stories from your organization or people that volunteer for you to establish this brand loyalty and trust. You want them to keep coming back to you and for more, to give them this information and to be their resource. So especially around your event planning, the before and the after, building up your content prior to National Voter Registration Day is going to be important, and creating that personal connection will help strengthen that. And then this one seems obvious, but a strong call to action, such as encouraging sharing, will expand your reach. And what we want to really highlight for the event and for this day is that you remain as neutral and nonpartisan as possible, because voting is for every voter out there. So if you are able to vote, we want you to register to vote and do so. So when you are thinking about what encourages sharing, again, it goes back to this visually engaging content that truly stands out. It's about focusing on what the people in your audience like and want to keep sharing. So if it's funny memes, if it's data points, if you're in academia, it's really important that you have that kind of content. But then at the end, your call to action is share with your friends. Make sure that you're registered to vote. Did you call your neighbor down the block? Make sure you do. And all of these things lead to the benefits below. Of course, it's increased engagement, stronger brand loyalty, the conversion rate for all of y'all. It's important that you are gaining that conversion rate that you're looking for. So if you're looking for people to sign up for your newsletter, donate to your cause, and in this case, we want people to register to vote, make sure it's clear and make sure this is for everyone. So that enhance the reach is one of the most important points we want to make today. So on the next slide, we're just summarizing what I just said. So tailoring your message, connecting with your audience, and ensuring your content is balanced and clear. These elements will help guide you through anything that you're working on. So I say this as somebody who has developed websites, written press releases, been placed in national outlets. Making sure your message is tailored and resonates with your audience. I know Allen mentioned it. I know Travis mentioned it. I'm going to mention it too. If you do not tap into your community, you know them best. We don't. You're not going to have that reach extended. So make sure that you are tailoring your messages as clearly as possible. And all of us on this call, I'm sure, have our own social media accounts. Think about what is really engaging to you. Think about the last op-ed you read and how deeply passionate it was. These stories in your community are actually some of the most powerful tools that you have in your toolkit. So yes, they have provided a toolkit for you with press releases and social media graphics, but the narrative that you tell from your community's perspective is really going to be what matters the most. And word from the wise, the remaining partisan and neutral is going to be such an important element of this because there are so many people who don't want to hear more partisan content, and they're more likely to register to vote if you speak their language. So another thing that is really important with these visual elements that involve this balance and clear is knowing the difference when to show, not tell, and not overwhelming your audience with text-heavy content. So what I mean by show, not tell, a beautiful infographic, a video, having an image of you volunteering in the community, that is more powerful sometimes than explaining what you have done and what you've accomplished. So I'm just going to keep on building on what Travis was saying. So with social media, we have a couple different strategies for optimization and amplification. And when we think about optimizing for your platforms, you've got to think about not only the content, but how is this going to look? How is this going to be shared? Something simple that people don't often think about, if you're using a social media share like Sprout Social or HubSpot, you need to make sure your images are actually the right size for what you're sharing, because if it doesn't fit on the screen or if it's inconsistent in its look when it's shared, then you're less likely to receive engagement from it. You might be cutting off the most important part of your post. I know that Travis did mention this, but consistent branding and messaging throughout your content, it helps build that brand loyalty. If one day you're saying something about the weather and then the next day your content is focused on the Olympics and making memes around that, it's not going to make a lot of sense to your audience, and it's not going to help inspire them to act and to encourage sharing and all of the other things that we've mentioned. For the optimization element, the generating content in various formats, that keeps their attention coming back to the page. So if you only share quote cards, you're not as likely to receive engagement or shares, and you're not likely going to have as much engagement with your page. And then finally, making it easy to share. This, again, points back to the neutral and nonpartisan. If your organization can't speak about a certain candidate or about a certain party, then your audience is probably not going to want to share something that is about a certain candidate or a certain party. So making sure that it's clear about what you're asking or what you're presenting will help optimize your message overall. Now, amplification. This part is probably one of the key elements of why we find so much success in our social media strategies. There are some very unconventional ways that work and that are wonderful for amplifying your message. And especially if you're trying to attract people to your event, these steps are some of the best ways to do so. So tap into your network. If you need to do a collaborative post, so like the example I'm showing on We Rate Dogs, I wanted to use a non-election example because this one has garnered a lot of attention in the past year and a half. If you partner with organizations that have a stronger reach than yours, you're more likely to be able to, awesome, thanks, Nicholas, but We often like to say that you're doubling your opportunity. You're going to get new followers from this. So it's not hard to make the ask. The worst thing you can be told is no if you reach out to another university to do something in partnership. I'm an SEC school. Maybe you get another SEC powerhouse and pull together and try to get people to register to vote. I know that might not be as easy as it sounds, but again, we're celebrating this day. I think it's possible. Also, it's knowing when to reach out to people with a broader reach than you. So if there are other people in your community that have thousands and thousands of followers and you want to make sure that everybody in your hometown knows about this event that you're hosting, shoot these people a DM. It is that simple and it works. I have had so much success in a plan that simple that, again, it's all about the ask. Just do it. Don't be afraid to boost content. And what that means is if you have a little bit left over in your budget for this event, go ahead and boost that Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn post, put a couple dollars behind it and start getting it in front of different people within your audience. You can geo-target, you can do a lot of different things, and the tools are even easier to use than when they kicked off, oh, I don't want to date myself, but 10 years ago. And harping on what Travis said, because it matters a lot, hashtags are not only for weddings, they really strengthen your reach. So make sure that when you're advertising this event and anything leading up to it or anything after, that you use hashtags such as voting and politics and government and because you're going to be able to find other people grouped in that hashtag who may be interested in joining and attending your National Voter Registration Day event. So here's where it gets exciting. How do we leverage our local media partners? And first off, this is a not foolproof plan, but it's something that anybody can do, whether you're a comms person in your organization or you know nothing about the media. So it's 3 simple steps: building relationships, conducting the outreach, and being willing to collaborate. So under building relationships, your first step is just figure out who you want to form a relationship with. If you want them to cover your event, now is the time to start honing in on those people, whether it's a voting person, elections, a community events, anything that may be related to politics or education. Now is the time to find those folks. And you can do that through Twitter. You can do that through using AI tools, through any search engine. Most of these media professionals have their beats associated with their Twitter handles or X handles, excuse me, and also available on their website. So you can find them. They're easy to track down, and most of them have forward-facing emails. Once you have that information, make an introduction. It's as simple as sending a quick note saying, my organization is participating with 4,000 other fantastic community partners for this big event. Can we talk to you about it? And it could be offering information about a past event, current data that you have, what y'all are planning. You have the opportunity to have a coffee with somebody and talk to them. And what I've learned through this career path is that people are always willing to sit down and have a conversation with you, even if they aren't gaining anything from it in the moment. Your organizations have so much to offer at different points in time that they're going to sit down with you. And if it's about your event, then great. So I know I'm short on time, so I'm going to kick it up a notch because we have one more fantastic slide. So for the media outreach, we want to make sure that we're using a variety of options and materials. You have a ton in your toolkit already made for you. So the press releases, you have a template for that. Make sure that you work with your team here to tailor it to your community. Be consistent and clear with your ask. I will say this, a million times on this call, but being clear is incredibly important. And always lead with new information and keep it short and sweet. Axios has a theme called Smart Brevity, and it's also a book. Keep everything short and to the point. And then finally, collaboration. Y'all can read yourselves on what the collaborative opportunities are, but one of the strongest things you can do is continuing to invite the media to your events, to be a part of your events, and to show that they are part of this community as well. So we are going to touch on very quickly getting ahead of crises, and it's a very important thing to prepare in advance to respond appropriately and plan for the recovery. In the preparation, this is probably the most important part of the slide, is that you understand the difference between an incident or a crisis. So an incident is something that is very quick to handle. You maybe don't need to pull in your senior management. Maybe it's a tweet that can be deleted that wasn't that nefarious. Those are usually the incidents. A crisis is something that requires an entire response system from messaging. You probably need to take multiple days to address it and need to monitor for longer periods of time. So we recommend for anything that is considered a crisis to have messaging, spokespeople, and start those relationships with the media as quickly as possible. We included a crisis communications plan if your team does not have one. Don't feel a lot of pressure to take care of it, but what you're going to see in there is an outline of how you can help prepare in advance. The response is equally as important. You need to lead with clear, transparent communication, always sticking to your talking points. You're going to see that the media is going to try to get you to sidestep, but if you are prepared with your talking points, you can always pivot back strongly to what you want to say. Managing misinformation, a lot of this has to do with monitoring what's actually being said. So enabling your team to set up, whether it's X monitoring or other social media platforms or news sources, staying on top of that will help you manage misinformation and correct anything that's being shared. Also, making sure that everything is accurate and clear, just like social media, just like anything you create, everything needs to be to your talking points, elevating what is true and then avoiding any discrepancies. And then finally, once you have this statement prepared, make sure it's shared across all of your channels and it is the same. You don't want to have multiple versions of a response, especially during a crisis, because you want to be able to point back to the exact same thing. And then finally, for the recovery, it's important that you have all of your questions answered and that your organization has addressed what it needs to address. And is there a clear understanding of what actually occurred? So when we think about this for our organizations, especially around voting and elections and democracy, there's a lot of misinformation that's out there. There's a lot of tiebacks to organizations that aren't necessarily true, that may be supporting our causes. So it's important that everything is clearly stated and that we reflect on how we presented that information. And then finally, go ahead and adjust your strategy and continue monitoring for anything else that may be continuing after the fact. There usually are a handful of flutters, but the media cycle is fast. Thankfully, if anything, which we hope it doesn't, but if anything were to happen under these reputational, legal, and safety security categories, it passes quickly. So you always have the opportunity to address these things and you can take back the control. So we have provided a couple examples. Yes, y'all will receive the deck. So thank you very much. And I'm going to pass it back to Ellen.
I say thank you again, Kayla and Travis. Very insightful. And I will just close out with a couple of resources and answer your Q&As. So here is a list of all of our communication strategies and information. They're all located on our website. So we will send out the deck with all these links attached. But if you go into our website and look at our communications, all these different resources are located in that. And then some important dates to put on your calendar. So on every Friday between 2 and 3, we have a Zoom. If you subscribe to our Google Calendar, you'll have access to the link so that you can jump on at any time between 2 and 3. If we're available, we'll answer any questions that you may have. And if for whatever reason you're not available during those times, please feel free to just email myself or Cheyenne Sapp, and we'll be able to answer your questions. On August 28th, we have another webinar with covering our state guides with the Fair Election Center. Great resource for you if you are in a state and you're new to voter registration, or if you're in a state and voter registration has changed, or if you just want to learn more about how voter registration is different for each state. It's a great webinar to participate in on September 11th. That's 6 days before NVRD. We're doing a last minute NVRD planning webinar. Just some last things to catch up. If you have any questions, anything that you may be missing, it's a great opportunity to get some insight on that. And then last but not least, our previous webinars. If you get an opportunity, please go back and you can find all this information on our website. But if you go to the website, you can see some of our previous webinars, which have some great information that's applicable to anybody in this chat. So if you have an opportunity, please go back and look at our old webinars. And last but never least, on September 17th is National Voter Registration Day. So we're looking for activations across the country. We're already ahead as far as premier community partners on our on what our expectations were. So we're expecting this NVRD to be larger than ever. So we're looking forward to seeing your participation in that. And with that said, we will move on to Q&A. There were only a few questions that came in, but I will answer them as quickly as possible. The first one was around languages for our different posters and stickers. They are in Spanish, Haitian Creole, and multiple other languages. What we would do is say, go to the website. We posted the link in the chat and look at the different materials that we're distributing this year. Also, when you register as a community partner, you'll have the opportunity to say which languages are applicable to your community, so you can get them in more languages than just one. Also, on National Voter Registration Day, someone asked about the hashtags. The two main hashtags that we have is hashtag Vote Ready and hashtag National Voter Registration Day. So if you get an opportunity, please make sure to add those hashtags to any posts that you do on that day so that we can make sure to highlight it. Also, I see a question around joining our listserv. If you sign up as a community partner, the key in all this is sign up as a partner. Once you're a partner, you have access to all the materials, our newsletter, our webinars, and just really a plethora of resources that you can use to your benefit. So the first step in that, and you can see it in the chat under Travis, sign up as a community partner if you haven't. And if you are currently a community partner and have some additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And just being mindful of time, I also see one last question around access to additional resources if you're a part of libraries. So we have two premier partners that we love to elevate around libraries. Every Library and American Library Association are two of our partners who are doing phenomenal work. Actually, this year in particular, librarians have taken on a lot of responsibility around voter registration. So I want to first say kudos to you and the hard work you're doing, and to extend out our olive branch of any way in which we can support that connection. Please feel free to reach out to me, and I will help to at least foster that connection to the partner. And then I also will say, if you see any other partners on here, if you look through the chat and you see anyone that you may be from, or excuse me, that are in your community or from the same community, please connect with them. It's a great opportunity to really show the connection and community and the way in which different organizations work towards a common purpose. It's a great, to me, National Voter Registration Day is one of the greatest examples of democracy because it implores everyone to come together. In a country in which we sometimes are pulled apart for various reasons, and people can always find a difference between all of us, the commonality is really the strength in us. And if we lean into that, this is the great opportunity to really showcase that. With that said, please be mindful that all of our, that the webinar and all the materials will be shared after. And please sign up as a community partner so that you can have access to those resources. With that said,
I just want to echo that, Alex. I'm seeing a lot of questions about how to access the resources and toolkits. And again, they're available to all partners. So just make sure you sign up as a partner. It takes 5 minutes. It's very quick and easy. Our goal is to register as many folks as possible this year. We're aiming for 5,000 partners. We're very, very close. So if you can sign on, if you can get people like you and groups you work with to sign on, we'd love that. I'm going to drop that in the chat one more time before we wrap up here. But yeah, sign up and you get instant access to all of our resources. You'll get a follow-up email within seconds with links to everything. So that's my first recommendation.
Thank you for that, Travis, and thank you for elevating that again. So with that said, I want to say thank you again to all the panelists. Thank you again for your insight, and thank you to every partner who has joined this webinar. We very much appreciate the work you're doing and hope that this was a benefit to you in your access into your activation on National Voter Registration Day. So thank you again and look forward to seeing you soon.